So hi everybody, and welcome to another CTO webinar. Before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are here with us today. Today's webinar is on employee experience, or EX. It's now a major factor in why people choose one employer over another. Today's webinar explores some of the key components of workplace and employee experience, why they matter, and how to intentionally foster a provider of choice culture. You'll note your cameras are on. I have flicked you back on again, guys, so that we can engage a little bit better throughout the workshop. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Mr. Bruce Williams. Hi, Bruce.
Good morning, Vicky. Welcome those of you joining us live and those joining us on the video. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bruce. So a little bit about Bruce today. Bruce loves to help people understand how other people tick so they can work together with less stress and more yes. With a focus on leadership, communication and team dynamics, he has been delivering adult education, coaching and professional development programs for over 4 decades. Pardon me, and is a regular contributor to training and development programs for allied health organisations and the aged and community care sector. So without further ado, Bruce, I know you've got a lot to flash on through today. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Vicky, and yeah, thanks again for inviting me to share with the troops. Like I say, it's an honour to be here, and yeah, I think just prior to the pandemic, I started to get involved in the aged care, community care sectors, right at the start of some of the biggest challenges that you guys have ever faced. So it's been an interesting journey, and I'm really pleased I'm still involved in this area and able to provide some assistance to people. One of the really fascinating things that the pandemic and lockdowns and all the associated challenges have done, they've really brought the winds of change through the employment sector, and not just this sector, but across the board. We're looking at employment in every industry these days. There's some real differences in the ways that people are approaching the job that they have or the work that they do. And so becoming an employer of choice or creating that kind of a culture has taken on real significance. So really excited to share with you folks today. I will warn you, I speak quickly. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We're probably skipping stones across the top of the lake in terms of depth. So we're going to cover a lot of territory, and we'll move quickly. That said, please, if there's something that's unclear, feel free to unmute and ask a question or pop something in the chat. If I don't see it, I'm sure Vicky will notice and call my attention. More than happy to answer questions as we go through or clarify something if it's not perhaps as clear as you'd like it. And also you may have downloaded a worksheet that's associated with this this particular presentation. That you'll see there's some blanks to fill in. Please don't feel that you need to write down everything that's on all the slides, because you will have access to a PDF of the slide deck, so you don't need to write down all that information. It's there for you in a resource folder that you'll have access to after this webinar. And there's also a number of additional tip sheets and links to other resources associated with the information that we're talking about today. Because as I said, we're going to cover a lot of ground, and some of those things may really pique your interest and you'd like to go a little deeper. And so there's a huge range of resources associated with this webinar that you can tap into afterwards, including a reading list with some fabulous books on these topics. So we're trying to provide as much information as we can in the webinar, but as much to support you afterwards as well. So let's dive in. Where we're going today, we're going to talk about the experience economy. We're going to talk about the power of moments. We'll look at something that psychologists call the peak end rule, and why it's important to map the journey for our employees, and perhaps not in the way we necessarily think traditionally. We'll talk about design thinking, or co-design as some people call it, why a growth mindset is critical, and we'll sort of wrap it all up by talking about some key moments that matter and how we can go about designing those and creating a workplace that people want to be a part of. Speaking of those kind of workplaces, there are a lot of successful organizations, companies, community organizations, as well as in the corporate sector that understand two key features of a workplace that attracts people and retains people. Particularly given the economic context that we have now, the social context, the political context that we're in these days, there are two key things that stand out in all the research. The first of those is that successful organizations understand that we are now in an experience economy. I'm going to explain that in a little bit more detail as we go through. But there's been a real shift in how the economy, or where value is seen in the economy, and that includes where value is seen in terms of employment. The second thing that successful organizations understand is that it's vital to create moments that matter. It's not necessarily useful to try and create a workplace where everything is wonderful. That's a bit of a fantasy, and it's a waste of time and resource to attempt that. But it is critical to create moments that matter in the workplace. And the good news is that we don't have to have a lot of those. But if we have the right kind, just often enough, that's enough to make sure the workplace that we create for our staff and our team members is one that attracts good people, and keeps good people. So let's unpack the first one. What is the experience economy? If you think about traditional economy, and we're talking about it's kind of pre-industrial area, where everyone lived on farms. It's an agrarian economy, and everything was traded in commodities. I had some milk, you had some grain, I had some eggs, maybe you had some cattle hides, and we would just simply swap those things. And commodities are traded usually in bulk. Even today, we have commodities that are traded in bulk. After the industrial era, we moved through to pre-packaging things and having them in shops, and we can go in and I didn't have to buy a hayload, a wagon load of grain. I could go to the shop and buy pre-milled flour in a 1 kilo packet, right? So we've shifted to a goods economy. But then, particularly over the last century or so, we've seen that the service economy rose to the fore. And so, whereas even today I might be able to buy coffee beans by the ton at an incredibly cheap rate compared to what I pay in the shops, if I go to Woolworths or Coles or Aldi and buy a kilo of coffee beans, that's comparatively it's going to cost me a lot more per kilo. But if I go to a coffee shop and buy a cup of coffee, I'm paying not just for the coffee, but I'm paying for that person that's coming and asking me what I want, which kind of milk do I want, what kind of cup do I want, etc. And they're creating it and bringing it to me, and I don't have to make it myself. And so we'll pay more for that cup of coffee sometimes than we will for a packet of coffee in the shops. But what we're seeing now is that we're now in an experience economy. Service is not enough anymore. I'll talk about why that is in a moment. We are now in an experience economy where people will pay a premium for a quality experience. Okay, there are heaps of coffee shops around, but which one treats me the best? Which one really pays attention to me personally? And so the value of what we're purchasing, the higher value is seen in things that create memories and meaning. So yes, I may have a favorite coffee shop here, but if I travel to Paris and I'm sitting somewhere with, in a beautiful cafe and I'm looking across at the Eiffel Tower and the Seine and this wonderful landscape in front of me, I'm going to pay a premium price for that coffee. And you will. I don't know if you've ever been to the Champs-Élysées or anywhere else in Paris and bought a double espresso and a croissant. You pretty much need to take out a second mortgage for some of those places. But what we're paying for is not the coffee, not even the service, it's the experience, the person I'm with, the moment, that memory. And we'll pay a premium for that. The same goes for the workplace. It's not just about the transactional nature of the workplace, it's about the experience of the workplace now. And we're seeing that this is the first time we've got 5 generations at one time in the workplace. all the way from boomers all the way through the other letters of the alphabet and the different generations that we have. And there's a shift in thinking around what's important about the work that I do. And very much now it's moved on to how this work makes me feel. It's not just about the paycheck. It's about, is this work important to me? Does this create meaning for me? Do I feel valued here? How does this work make me feel? And that's the value that people are looking for in the workplace. We've moved on from a transaction mindset where, excuse me, where employment is seen as a transaction. I give you my 38 hours a week and you give me a paycheck at the end of that week. I turn up and do what you tell me and you pay me for that transaction. And that's very much a service mentality. We're givers and receivers. I give you my time, you give me an income. You give me instructions, I give you service, etc. So, and we refer to people as employees, staff, workers, personnel, and even the somewhat dehumanizing human resources. So where we've seen the shift now is into an experience economy where the workplace is not just about those transactions. We're looking for relationship. And rather than calling people staff or workers or the labor force, we need to begin to think of the people who are providing the services for our clients as participants, as co-creators, as collaborators, as contributors, as partners. It's very much about a partnership. One of the things I talk to, and this is in the corporate sector particularly, one of the messages I'm trying to get across to a lot of employers is that you need to treat everybody as though they're a volunteer. And I know with many of your organisations, you have both a paid workforce and a volunteer workforce, and sometimes they're perceived differently and treated differently. But everybody's a volunteer, no matter whether we're paying them or not. They are choosing to be a part of the organization, and we need to be aware that they want to feel that they are a partner, a contributor, a collaborator, and a co-creator of the services that are being provided. So it's a different mindset, and it's one where, as a business, we need to think not about how can we use our people to grow the business, but rather how can we use the business to grow our people? Because as I mentioned, the experience of the workplace has a higher premium these days, particularly since the pandemic and lockdowns and all those experiences that people have been through over the last 3 years or so. People have reevaluated what's meaningful for them, and work is one of those critical factors. We've seen a huge transition in what's happening in the workplace and a big exodus from some employers, from some sectors, where people are going, I value my life and my time and my relationships more than getting a paycheck from this particular organization. And so while pay levels are important, in a sector where pay levels are pretty much consistent, the thing that's going to make an employer stand out is the employee experience. So if our pay levels are pretty consistent across the sector, what makes us stand out as an employer? What makes us stand out is, are we creating a workplace where people build relationships, where there's a sense of belonging and contribution, where they have opportunity to learn and master their craft or their skills, and where they feel they have a sense of meaning and purpose. All of those things now become critical factors in creating a positive workplace experience. And to do that, we need to focus on moments that matter. As I mentioned before, it's not about having every day being, sunshine, rainbows, lollipops and unicorns, and everyone dancing around and singing Kumbaya, but it is about creating a workplace where there are moments that are significant, moments where we do feel that there's a relationship here. The relationships between staff and leaders, between operational staff and managers, etc. It's no longer a command and control kind of situation. The workplace has shifted. People's relationships have shifted. People's understanding of communication have shifted, and now it's much more about managers and leaders need to these days be much more of a coach than someone who's directing from the sidelines and simply telling people what to do. It's about helping people understand their role, their contribution, why it's meaningful, etc. So we're looking for moments that we can elevate, moments that we can turn up the volume, so to speak, or lift people up in some way. We're looking for moments, what employers are looking for, moments of pride where they can feel, I did something worthwhile today. This was valuable to me and to somebody else, and that makes me feel good about myself. We're looking for moments of insight where I learn something. I might learn something about myself. I might learn something about my colleagues or the workplace. I might learn something about the clients I'm serving, or something about how this contributes to creating a better world. Again, it doesn't have to happen every day, but it's those moments of elevation, moments of pride, moments of insight, and moments of connection where I feel like I'm seen, I'm valued, I'm heard, I'm listened to, I'm contributing, I'm making a difference. And these people that I'm doing it with appreciate that, value that, and I value their contribution to me. So it's not just about the work that we do, but also who are we doing it with and how connected do we feel to those people. So how do we create these moments that matter? First, we need to understand what those moments are and where they come from. Now, there are lots of moments in our day. There are mundane moments, right? That's if you think about the employee experience, the mundane moments are those things that we do every day. It's the same kind of thing. I follow this process every day. I park the car, I swipe in, I log in. There's a checklist that I follow. There's at shift changes, this is the checklist that I fill in. There are things that we do every day. It's almost by rote. It's almost unconscious. But there are moments in the day where something captures my attention, and that means I have to be more mindful. Perhaps as a client perhaps as a new client coming on board, I haven't met them before. I really have to think about how I'm going to engage with them. There are moments that are memorable, and those are moments that create emotion. Whether that's my emotion or someone else's emotion, but where there's emotion in a moment, it does something to our subconscious and to the way our brains work that makes that moment stand out in our memory. And if it stands out enough, it will sink down into longer term memory. So those moments become memorable. And I'm sure if you think about your own employee experience, the days kind of blur into each other, the months, the years sometimes. But when you stop and think, there are moments that stand out for you. And usually they're moments where there was some emotion attached to that moment, whether positive or negative. It doesn't really matter, but it's something that captures your attention and there's some emotion attached. Where those things become even more meaningful, where there are moments of discovery. There's something about human nature that loves to discover new things. We're curious by nature and we're inquisitive by nature. And when we discover something, there's that kind of, there's the little dopamine hit, that aha moment that motivates us and inspires us to go, oh, wow, I didn't know that before. And it's something that really does drill down and make that moment even more meaningful. And then there are transformational moments. And again, I'm sure if you examine your own experience, there are probably moments where you've changed course some way in your career. Perhaps you've left one career and moved across to another because something really deeply significant to you has occurred. Now, that may be something that's occurred in your personal life, in your family life. It can be a health challenge. But often there are deeply significant moments that happen for us that are transformational, that really do redirect us. And those things have an incredible impact on how we approach life, relationships, and work. So all of these kinds of moments need to be there in the workplace. The good news is, right, that impact and value goes up with each of these kinds of things. The even better news is that the frequency of these kinds of moments reduces as you go from left to right across screen. So we have lots of mundane moments, and the good news is that's okay. They don't have much impact, and often we don't see the value in those. Though, creating systems and routines and getting better and better at doing the same things over and over does have value, but it doesn't stand out for us. things that capture our attention, things that are memorable, when we have some moments of discovery, or even those transformational moments, each as we go from left to right, those things have greater impact, but they need to happen less often. So that's the good news, because as I said, it's not about creating a workplace where everyone's bouncing around and everyone's happy and everybody's nice to each other all the time. That's a little bit of a fantasy, and if we attempt to do that, we're going to run into trouble, because life is complex, it's uncertain, it's ambiguous, and often frustrating because there's things that turn up where we don't expect. But we can utilize, the wonderful messiness of life to create meaningful and memorable moments as we're navigating through those kinds of spaces. I guess if I boil that all down to a very simple statement, it would be that great experiences are mostly forgettable and occasionally remarkable. And that goes for the workplace as well. As I said, if you reflect on your own experience, there's years of experience there, but there are moments that stand out for you that were occasionally remarkable, whether they were deeply problematic challenges or whether they were high points in your experience. They stand out as being remarkable for you. But the bulk of it is forgettable. So that's okay. In fact, it's a good thing. Humans operate better when we have consistency and occasional moments that capture our attention, that are meaningful, emotional, when there's moments of discovery or moments of transformation. That's where we operate best. So I just invite you for a moment to think about a memorable workplace experience that you've had. Think back across your work life. Is there a moment that stands out for you? So the moment stands out for you, and you may want to just jot that down on your notes. But would anyone like to unmute and just share a moment that stood out for you in the workplace? Something that really kind of stood out for you that was really memorable, or a moment of discovery or a moment of transformation. Would anyone like to share?
Well,
I
I
do
told you
love
they
an
were
awkward
quiet.
silence.
I can come in and say something. Going back quite a few years, very young, in the early workplace roles, for me, it was a giant standout to walk through a warehouse that I worked at with my boss, who treated every single person, from the cleaner to the management level of the people everybody was the same, treated with respect, with courtesy, with dignity. And to me at that time, that stood out immensely to me. And I don't think I've ever forgotten it ever since.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's it really is, you know. And how often did that happen for you? It wasn't every day, right? It was.
No, it wasn't every day. No, not so much in words every day, but more in actions every day.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And it's it's wonderful to hear about those kind of leaders, because we often hear the horror stories of the opposite. So it's lovely to hear a positive story. Is there anyone else that has a memorable workplace experience that stands out for you? No,
Nobody got anything?
we're all feeling a little bit shy today. That's okay. I'm sure you're thinking of something and going, oh yeah. It's worth noting that, and just thinking about just taking a couple of minutes, perhaps at this end of this webinar, or perhaps the end of the day, just to think about your workplace experience and how rare some of those moments are, but the impact of them. What was the value of that impact, and how did that change how you approached your work? It's a fascinating element of human nature that we don't need constant. We don't need these moments to be constant. In fact, sometimes the rarer they are, the more impact they have. But it is important that we have them. Psychologists talk about this aspect of human nature as the peak end rule. that we have this amazing capacity to forget about stuff that's ordinary and sometimes even negative in our experience, because there are certain things that stand out. And there's a whole range of rationale around perhaps why that might be so. Some are relating to, you know, the ways that human beings have evolved. And if we remembered every negative experience, we'd probably hide in a cave somewhere and never come out. So there's an aspect of the way that we've evolved that helps us to forget about certain things, because other positive things draw us forward. And they call it the peak end rule. That is, that in any kind of experience, often there is a high point and there's an end point that really stands out for us. And the end point, they also talk about transition. So some people talk about peak, end, and transition moments, but usually it's just referred to as the peak end rule. So, for example, if you may go to a theme park with your kids or your grandkids, and you spend an entire day in a theme park, and somebody a week later asks you about it, we often forget about the hours of queuing up and the tedium of various elements of trying to walk around and find that particular ride that the ones that you're with want to go on. But we remember the moment of the ride and the excitement on the kids' faces, and the laughter, and we've got the happy snaps of the day, and those are the things that we look at, and those are the things that tend to stand out for us more so than the other elements that go into creating that day. So again, a lot of mundane experience, but it's the peaks and the ends that tend to stand out for us in our memory. The same thing happens for us in the workplace. And if we understand that, what we can do then is begin to think about, well, how do we create more peaks? And if there are endings or transitions, how do we make those really significant? And if you think about an end is also a beginning. So, the first day experience is actually an end. It's an end of not being employed and the start of being employed. It's the end of working in one organization and the start of ending in a new one. So those beginnings and endings and various peaks that we can identify in the workplace journey are important moments where we can create something that helps us design a workplace experience that people are keen to be a part of. So how do we do that? It's pretty simple, really. It's not rocket science. It's about mapping the employee journey, identifying what moments that matter, and then designing memorable experiences. Whether that's just creating some emotion around that, whether that's creating some discovery, or simply capturing people's attention, or actually a transformational moment. It doesn't really matter, as long as we understand that the workplace needs to be mostly forgettable and occasionally remarkable. Mostly forgettable and occasionally remarkable. So usually when we think about the work, the employee journey, and we talk about the employee journey with an organization, it tends to look something like this. We're going to attract people to come and work with us in the organization that we're a part of. So we go out and we recruit. Then once they're employed, we go through an onboarding process. That's followed by an induction process to make sure that they're really bedded down on how to operate within the organization. We want to make sure that we're engaging them, so we have various things. Perhaps we have regular team meetings, we have regular one-on-ones, we have regular performance reviews, and other ways of communicating and engaging and keeping people up to par on what they're meant to be delivering in the organization. We might single out particular individuals because we see a certain skill set and we want to develop that. And so we're constantly working on retaining those people by keeping that engagement and development happening. And eventually at some point they exit the organization. So usually when you talk to people, they'll refer to this, and it has a very HR kind of a feel to it. This is a sort of journey for most employees. But what's missing from this picture? What's missing from this picture? It sounds very structured, very organized, very logical, but that's probably part of the problem. If all we think about are these stages of the employee journey, what we're forgetting is that the actual employee journey is an emotional one. Human beings are emotional first and logical second. We are emotional first and we are logical second. We don't necessarily think things through. We feel things first, and that influences our thinking. So the actual employee journey has some positives and negatives to it. And depending where, how those things impact on us, that has a huge correlation with whether or not we believe that this particular job is a good one for me. Now, I mentioned that as kind of a fantasy land to try and create an employee experience that's just all positive. It's never going to happen. Life is too messy, and human beings are uniquely designed to be very individual. So it's a bit of a fantasy to think we could create a workplace where everyone's always going to be happy all the time. And I'm sure most of you are across that as an idea. So let's not waste our time and resources attempting to do that. Rather, what we want to do is design an optimal experience. And that is one where we simply, rather than trying to turn those negatives into positives, what we want to do is simply neutralize them. Right? It takes a hell of a lot of effort to take something, if we had a scale of 1 to 10 and my experience is a 2 and you want to get me to an 8, that takes a lot of time and energy and resources to move me that far. But if you want to take me from a 2 to a 5, less energy, less resources, but I'm just taking it up to where it doesn't matter anymore. I want to shift the things that are often negative and turn them into mundane things. If I can do that, that's all I need to do, because I know that as on top of that, there are going to be some positive experiences as well. So, right, and that's those positive experiences that are our workplace brand. The other stuff is bland, and that's okay. Bland is all right as long as brand is standing out, right? We've got mostly forgettable and occasionally remarkable. That's the goal of creating a positive workplace experience. It's not about making everything positive. It's about neutralizing some of those negatives, just making them ordinary, and helping to accentuate the things that are already there that are positive. And how can we design a place that will do that more effectively? So one of the examples of a workplace that's done this really successfully is the Good Kitchen in Denmark, which is a food delivery service for elderly people in the community, and also elderly people who are recovering from surgery or some other kind of a health issue, and perhaps receiving some sort of rehabilitation support. It was a government-funded organisation. It was free to people who were able to access the service, to get meals delivered to their homes for free while they were in recovery. It had a terrible reputation. It had a very low take-up from people in the community. And originally, it wasn't called the Good Kitchen. Before they went through a design process, they did a co-design or a design thinking process. The organisation was called the Hospital Food Service. Not a really attractive title. The food was okay. It was nutritious, but the menu had no variety to it. And a big part of this was that the staff who were actually preparing the meals, packaging the meals, and delivering the meals didn't feel that they were valued, didn't feel that they were able to contribute in any significant way to how the meals were designed, what the packaging looked like, whether or not the meals and the menus changed across the year. And you can see in these photographs, this is post design thinking process that the organisation got involved in. And you can see them there with lovely uniforms. There's some beautiful packaging, and the organisation was renamed the Good Kitchen. All of that came out of a design thinking process. which is one in which they started off with empathy. Now, this organization actually had a two-prong approach. One was to look at the clients themselves. Why were they not engaging with the organization? I won't go into too much detail about that. There is a tip sheet that you can download about the design thinking process, and there's a link to a couple of websites that talk about this particular case study in a lot more detail. It's a fascinating read, some really good resources in there, so I do encourage you to access that. It's a great story. But you'll see there how they engage with the clients. But they engaged with the staff, and they brought in, so they wanted to empathize. By that, what is the staff's experience of this workplace? What is their experience of the work that they're doing? And they clearly defined what are the issues that the staff feel perhaps not up to scratch. Then they brainstormed ideas, they prototyped some ways forward, they tested those, and then they went ahead and created what after time became the Good Kitchen. And they had an incredible shift in not only staff attracting and retaining staff, but the quality of the food went up. What they discovered was that the staff didn't feel valued. Most of these were professional cooks who didn't feel that their ideas and input were being valued at all. So the organization actually brought in a qualified chef who spent some time with these people just to assess them. And at the end of that, he went back to management and said, these guys are high quality individuals that have all the acumen and skill set of qualified chefs. You need to treat them that way. So they gave them new uniforms, so they felt valued. They started listening to the employees' suggestion about what meals to use. They gave the staff more opportunities to actually design meals. Some of the feedback from the clients that they were getting was that the meals were always the same all the time. So they came up with this idea, and you'll see on the left there, there's a picture of a client, and there's a series of postcards. They started inviting the clients themselves to send postcards in with suggestions for meals or things that could be included. There's a whole range of different things where they just started listening to the staff, taking on board their ideas, and beginning to change the processes and things that allowed those people to really bring their skill set to the fore, create a sense of meaning and purpose, and built greater relationships between the staff themselves, but also between the staff and the people that they were serving. It's a great success story. I really encourage you to read more about it on some of those links. But so what is this design thinking process then? As I mentioned, it starts off with empathy. The first thing we need to do is empathize, and that's who is affected and how. Who is affected and how. So I'm just going to stop sharing the PowerPoint for a second so that I can use this flip chart behind me. If this does not look big enough on your screen, if you're on gallery view, you might want to shift to speaker view. That will make this a little bit bigger. But to start off with, we need to think about, well, who is this person and what is that person's experience in this moment? We'll talk in a minute about what are the moments that we want to focus on with staff. There are some that really stand out, but you could think of any moment in a staff's experience. You could pick any moment, whether it's a moment in their day, in their week, across their full employment journey. So like the first day at work, or perhaps when they're being, introduced to a new client, or they're being introduced to a new process. Anytime there's a transition, or perhaps, when someone's going through a performance review, those are moments that stand out for people. Why? We feel anxious about our performance being assessed, right? How's this going to turn out? Am I going to receive a positive review or a negative review? Those are moments that are emotional for people. So do we stop and think about what's happening for that person in that moment? The first day they turn up for work, the first time they're having a performance review, first time they're having a one-on-one with the boss. What's going on for them? So a great way to do that is what we call an empathy map. And that is, we want to think about that particular individual. What's the moment that they're experiencing? Perhaps it's their first day at work. What is that individual? What are they seeing? And so really simple way to do this, get a blank sheet of paper, draw these lines on it. There is a tip sheet that you can download that has a model of this that you can use if you just want to print one out, and start to brainstorm what are all the things that that person is seeing on their first day when they walk into the building. What do they see? Who do they see? What are they hearing as they walk in? What voices are they hearing? What noise are they hearing? What's going on for them that they can see, that they can hear? What might that person be thinking? What might that person be feeling? Are they feeling excited? Are they feeling anxious? What emotions are they experiencing? What thoughts are going on in the back of their head? What might they be doing in that moment, and what might they be saying in the moment? And all you need to do is sit down and kind of brainstorm for a little bit. There's two ways of thinking about empathy. Psychologists talk about empathy in a number of different ways, but there are two key ideas around empathy. One is emotional empathy, and that is that I literally feel what you're feeling in the moment. So someone who gives you some sad news, you feel sad as well. That's emotional empathy. I'm feeling what you're feeling, and there's a real connection there around that. What I'm talking about here is not necessarily emotional empathy. It's logical empathy. It's cognitive empathy, which is just as legitimate. What I want to do is I may not feel what they're feeling, but I want to understand what they're feeling in that moment, because if I can understand what they're feeling, I can design something that's going to help with this situation. I want them to feel certain things. I want them to think certain things about this place. What do I want them to see and to hear? What do I want them to be doing? What would I like them to be saying? Is it going to be uh-oh, or is it wow, right? So just spending a little bit of time thinking about those things. And one of the things you can do, sometimes it's worthwhile getting a team together and thinking about, okay, first day experience for somebody, what's it like? Get your team together and get them to talk about it. Give everyone some post-it notes, rather than brainstorming live onto a whiteboard or something. One of the things we know about brainstorming is that if you ask everybody in a group and somebody says something and you write it up there, that immediately anchors everybody's thinking. So what you want to do to get a breadth of thought is give everyone some post-it notes and say, here's the question. What do you think they're seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, and doing and saying? Give everyone some post-it notes and get them to write down their ideas. What do you think they're seeing? Get them to write a few ideas down. Once everybody's written down all their ideas, then go, okay, let's put them up there. Okay, what do we think they're seeing? And we get everyone's ideas, we post them up on the board. We throw them all up there. Now we have a whole bunch of ideas. We might go, okay, these three are all unique, but those two are kind of the same, so we're going to take that one away. We do that with each of those sections. Now we've brainstormed a really clear picture of what's perhaps going on for that person. It's a really easy way to do it, either as individuals or as a group. If you've got a group of recently employed people and you want to talk about first day experience, that's a great way to get some real lived experience up on there, right? So simple process to do, but it helps us understand that moment for that person. Whether that's, okay, what did you feel like on your first one-on-one with the boss? Let's talk about that. And we map that experience so we can understand that moment, who is affected and how are they affected. Let me come back to sharing the screen. Hopefully you should be able to see the PowerPoint again.
Yep, all good.
All good. Thanks, Vicky. So the next step then is to define what are the key issues that this person is experiencing. What's the headline here? If it's the first day experience, what is it about this moment that really stands out that might be a problem? In which case I want to eliminate that problem, at least bring it back to neutral. Perhaps it's parking. Parking was a nightmare. They were struggling to get a parking spot somewhere. And now they're already 3 minutes late to get in the door and they're feeling anxious. So there's a problem. How do we fix that? Maybe they don't know the room in the building that they're supposed to get to. And again, that creates some anxiety. How do we remove that anxiety and smooth that out? We don't want to make it amazing. We just want to make it mundane and ordinary for them. So what is the problem that we want to solve here? Then we're going to brainstorm a bunch of ideas. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we emailed them the day before and gave them a map of the building? What if we emailed them the day before and here's a parking pass for this particular space and here's how you find it? Let's brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas and what would it be like if we did that? Then we prototype it. We've got 3 or 4 ideas we want to test on day one experience. Let's try them out. So the next cohort of people that come in, we give it a shot, we test it. What really stood out? What worked? What didn't? What wowed, right? What did people comment and they go, oh, wow, this is so different from the last place I worked at. That's what we want to hear. So we're going to test it. What works? What doesn't work? If it works, great, let's roll it out across the organization. If it didn't work, let's go back to ideate. Well, what if we did it this way? Let's prototype a new test, have a go at that and see what works. So it's a very simple process, very logical, it's simple to do. And again, just pick one thing, pick one moment. Like I say, whether it's first day, whether it's first one-on-one, whether it's a new client, you're getting a new vehicle, don't know how, not quite sure how to operate it. What's that moment that someone experiences that might be emotional for them, and how do we level that out or elevate that moment? So just while we're on that, I'd encourage you to think about your employee journey, think about the employees that you have in your organization. What's a key touch point you think would easily benefit from a design thinking exercise? Maybe something is coming to mind for you while I'm talking about this process. Just jot that down now, so you know it's there in the back of your mind when you finish this and you go away and you talk about this webinar with someone else. Say, hey, I'd really like to have a go at redefining how we do this with people, right? Just jot down that idea now, so you've got a note of it to remember for later. And then I encourage you to use that process with that moment. So, because what we're looking for, again, we're looking for moments that elevate, that lift people up, or that turn up the volume on a particular moment. We're looking for moments of pride, moments of insight, moments of connection. I know, you sort of think, well, how do you turn up the volume on something? I worked with one organization where part of the onboarding process was to give people a uniform and to give them a name badge. And I asked them, well, how do you do that? And they said, well, they turn on at day one, we give them a box, it's got, various bits and pieces. It's got their lanyard with their security pass. It's got their uniform. It's got their name badge. We give them that. We go into, the room and we do the onboarding, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, how could you elevate that? They went through a design thinking process, and they decided that rather than give people the uniform and the badge as they walked in the door and got started with everything, part of the onboarding process was they actually got the CEO to come in, and he would personally hand out the uniforms and the badges, which were gift wrapped in tissue paper, right? So they gift wrap, they like getting a little gift, and he would personally hand out these things to the staff. And then as he did that, he said, when you open this up, you'll find your uniform and your name badge, and your name is on your uniform. We are welcoming you to this organization. And we want you to know, when you put on that uniform, you represent me, you represent us and the work that we do. And then he went on to explain why the work they were doing was critically important and valuable in the community. It elevated that moment and made it special. I mean, think about high school, right? When they elected the high school captains, what did they do? They didn't just quietly give them a badge somewhere. They got them up on parade, they made a fuss about them, and they handed out those badges and applauded them. And, so they just elevated that moment. And it made that moment stand out, and it emphasized meaning and purpose is attached to the work that you do. Very simple thing to do, something they already did. They just tweaked it a little bit and elevated that moment, turned it into a moment of pride and a moment of connection. Speaking about first day, I'll just run through a couple of examples of some moments that matter. One is John Deere. I'm sure you've heard of John Deere. a tractor company in the States, been around for generations. And if you were in America, you know, if you were a farmer in Minnesota somewhere, probably your great grandfather had a John Deere in every generation since. So it's a no-brainer when you buy a tractor, you go to John Deere and get one because it's part of your family culture. But when John Deere moved into Southeast Asia and particularly into India, they didn't have a cultural history there. So they made the first day experience for new staff a moment to begin to create that sense of belonging and meaning and cultural history for those people. When you, before you started on your first day at John Deere, you got an email that said, you know, Mary, you know, congratulations, you've joined a fantastic company. Just want to let you know when you turn up tomorrow, Mary is going to meet you at reception. Here's a photo of Mary in the email, and Mary's going to walk you through to your workplace and introduce you to the team. You turn up, Mary's there, big smile, welcome, how you going? Come in, etc. She takes you to your desk. There's a big banner beside your desk that indicates to everyone else on that floor that you're a new person. Now, they don't all come and file past one by one and shake your hand and you forget all the names, but during the day, because they know you're a new person, they all make an effort to come across and introduce themselves at some point and just say hello. When you open your computer, there's a screensaver with a photo, something like this, that says, you know, that also says, welcome to the most meaningful work you're ever going to do in your life. There's a video from the CEO explaining that we don't build tractors. We create food for families. We create business support for families in India so that they can create, you know, a business to support themselves. So that they weave in that kind of meaning and purpose to welcome to the organization. Someone takes them out to lunch, and there's a whole range of things they do on the first day that drives home the message, you're important, you belong here, and the work that we do together is valuable. They put a lot of thought into that first day experience. And what they found was that the divisions that used that, and not every division in John Deere in India used it, but the ones that did had something like a 50% increase in their retention rates. It just radically shifted how people felt about the organization just because of what they did with day one. There are biological reasons for that, biological and psychological. The way human brains are designed, the primitive parts of our brain want to know, am I safe and do I belong here? Am I safe and do you love me? As I said, we're emotional first and we're logical second. I'm not going to think about what can I learn unless I feel safe, unless I feel connected, because anxiety shuts down our thinking brain. We have evolved the same as most other kind of carbon-based life forms on the planet, that our subconsciously is deeply obsessed and vigilant with, am I accepted? Do I belong in this group? Because if my social group rejects me, I will die. It won't literally happen to us as human beings, but we feel like it will happen to us as human beings. We want to feel safe. We want to feel connected. And it's only in that space that our emotional aspects relax enough that we can think, be logical, and learn things, take on board information, etc. So that need for social connection is deep, and that's one of the key moments. Am I safe? Do I belong here? Do we share a future? If we can embed that into as many moments as possible in the workplace experience, we create a connection that people identify with and feel safe to bring their best work to. And speaking of that, another moment that has incredible impact that we know really stands out for employees is when we get feedback, right? Particularly when we make a mistake. Now, Jack Welch years ago was the CEO of General Electric, and he understood this need to feel safe, this need to feel like I belong before I'm going to learn anything. He had one of his senior executives who made a mistake that cost the company $10 million. So not an insignificant mistake. That exec was called into Jack Welch's office. He came in, he was pretty anxious and nervous, and Jack asked him to sit down, and he said, what's the point? You're just going to fire me, so let's get on with it. And Jack said, why would I sack you now? I just spent $10 million on your education. This conversation is, what did you learn from that, and what will we do differently in the future? That was a moment that mattered for that individual, right? Because he discovered that this wasn't about being punished for mistakes. This was a space where it's safe to make mistakes as long as I learn from them. It's a very different cultural space. And it speaks to something that's incredibly important. That is a growth mindset. We often approach things that, I want to protect my reputation and, that I'm good and I'm skilled at things, as opposed to seeing that we're always learning. The mistakes help me learn, feedback is valuable, and I improve with practice. There's a resource you can download about a growth mindset, research from Carol Dweck. She discovered that if we praise people for being good at things, they tend to want to protect that reputation and won't risk moving into challenges that might risk them not appearing good at something. If we praise and value people for putting in effort and for making progress, they're much more likely to take on bigger challenges and be willing to learn through mistakes and be confident to speak about the mistakes that they've made so that they can learn from them. It's an important difference in mindset. And if we can bring that mindset into people's moments in their workday, move them away from this fixed mindset that says, if I can't win, I don't want to play because I constantly have to prove myself. I always have to be right. I'm not going to take on challenges that might risk that. What we want is a growth mindset where we embrace challenges, where we see effort as a pathway to mastery. This is a space where I want to play so I can learn how to win. I don't always have to win. If I learn, I'll get better and I'll win the next time. I want to improve myself. This is not about proving myself all the time. It's about improving myself. And the difference, if we listen to the language that people use and we recognize whether we're building a fixed mindset for people or a growth mindset, right? I'm either good at it or I'm not. It's just who I am. I can't change it. If I have to work hard, I don't have the ability, right? If I don't try, then I won't fail, as opposed to a growth mindset that is looking for opportunities to grow, to experience, to learn, even to fail. If I learn from it, I'm still going to win. I only fail if I stop trying, right? So how do we help create that mindset with people? A big part of that is helping people feel comfortable to speak up with their ideas, to ask questions, with their concerns or mistakes. It's what Amy Edmondson calls psychological safety. Now, this is a part of creating a workplace culture where people value this workplace experience. It's somewhere where I do feel safe, I do feel like I belong, and this is a place I can learn. Google did some research into this some years ago. There's a project called Project Aristotle. They were looking for what are the elements of a top high-performing team and how can we duplicate that. They spent 2 years researching. I think it was about 180 or 200 different teams, which involved something like 37,000 staff across their organization worldwide. They looked at 250 different elements of team dynamic, personality traits, skill sets. They were looking for what's the perfect blend of skill sets and personalities, and if we can identify that, we can duplicate that. What they discovered surprised them. They could find no correlation between skills, personalities, and team performance. What they did discover was that these 5 elements that you can see on the screen: psychological safety, having team members that trusted each other, that had a high bar of excellence, clarity around roles and goals, a sense of meaning, and a sense that the work that I do matters. Those 5 things were the critical elements. It didn't matter about personality type or skill sets, roles, levels, or anything else. The other thing they discovered, that without psychological safety, none of these other ones mattered. You could have very clear goals and structure. You could have very clear understanding about meaning and impact and purpose, but without psychological safety or the sense that I can speak up with questions, ideas, with disagreement, to challenge things. If I don't feel safe to do that, if I don't feel safe to acknowledge mistakes, none of those other things matter. So how do we create that sense of psychological safety? How do we create a space where We feel safe to speak up. It's easy to ask questions. We can admit we don't know something. We feel safe to admit mistakes so we can learn from them, and it's easy to offer and ask for help. How do we go about doing that? Part of it is how we communicate with our team members. And as being aware that psychological safety is not about being nice all the time. It's not about, it doesn't matter what you do or say, your job is secure. It doesn't mean, it's not an excuse to complain. It's not permission to slack off. Psychological safety is about increasing the sense of safety around vulnerability. It's creating safety for people to acknowledge I messed up, to be able to apologize, to ask for help, to acknowledge that we don't know something, and to recognize, look, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree with you. It's also a space where we feel comfortable to thank people for feedback, and we feel comfortable to offer feedback. There's some really interesting research in the States with a bunch of hospitals where they looked at the correlation between the reporting of nursing errors and health outcomes for patients, because they figured if there were fewer errors, there would be better health outcomes. What happened when they crunched all the data, they were really surprised, because the hospitals that had low error reports also had low patient outcome levels. The hospitals that had higher levels of errors being reported actually had higher levels of patient outcomes. This was curious to them. They began to investigate that, and what they discovered was the hospitals that were not reporting errors, it didn't mean that they weren't making them. It meant that they weren't talking about them. They were hiding their errors because people were afraid they were going to be punished for making a mistake, so they didn't talk about them. The ones that felt safe to talk about their errors got to discuss them and how to fix them. They had better patient outcomes. That's psychological safety. It's a space where we can ask questions. How do we know that's true? What do you think? What can we learn from this? How should, what could we be doing differently in this space? This, or what am I missing here? None of us know everything about what's going on, so we need to be curious and ask questions, right? This is what Kim Scott calls radical candor. That's one of the books in the reading list, is this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And highly recommend this, because she talks about some very practical ways that you can create these a space of psychological safety, particularly around feedback conversations, delivering feedback, receiving feedback. It's what she calls radical candor, where we have a balance of caring personally for people and challenging them directly. We need to balance both those dynamics in those conversations. If all we do is care for people, but we don't challenge them, we end up with ignorance and nothing changes. If all we do is challenge people, but they don't feel like I'm safe and I belong, they become defensive. They start to hide their errors. If we don't demonstrate that we care individually for these people, if we don't challenge them directly, we end up with an insincere kind of a workplace where there's mistrust and no change. So we want a balance of caring personally and challenging directly. That's where we have growth and change. How do we create those moments? Right, if we need to challenge people, because if we don't challenge them, we don't say, look, we have really high standards here. If we simply care for people, and it's not unusual in this particular sector that we are a very caring group of people. We want to make a difference. We want to be of service. We want to provide benefits to society and community. But if we don't challenge people, if we're afraid to perhaps wound their feelings and we don't speak up and give them feedback, we can't fix a problem if we don't know what it is. So we end up with ignorance. On the other side of the scale, if we don't show people that we care, but we constantly challenge them, this can end up sounding like lectures and rants. I feel like I'm being punished for my mistakes all the time, etc. And we go right through to the darker end of the scale, where we have shouting and yelling and bullying behaviors. This is where people begin to resist, and they'll hide. We're going to hide our mistakes, and we're going to stop listening. If every time I hear the boss's voice and it's just telling me what I'm doing wrong, eventually that just becomes white noise, because I don't feel cared for. Equally, if we don't care, we don't challenge, we end up with mistrust. You've probably heard the saying, not my circus, not my monkeys. Why should I say anything? Why should I stick my head up? So we lack trust in the organization. We're not speaking up. We're not asking questions, and people start quiet quitting. I'm just going to do the bare minimum and get by, turn up, do my job, go home. That's not the kind of workplace that people want to be a part of. So we need that balance between caring personally and challenging directly. That's where growth and change happen, where we feel safe to ask for feedback and listen to feedback. And that's not just staff, but that's us as leaders. Are we asking our teams, what could I be doing better? Are we asking our the people that we're reporting to, how could I improve what I'm doing? Are we listening to the feedback that we get? Are we sharing our errors and mistakes? Are we creating a space where people feel safe to learn, to speak up, to ask questions, to offer suggestions, and to challenge other people? That's a robust space. That's a healthy space where we do feel that we belong, that we're safe, but we also feel safe to question things and say, I think we could do this better. So clear is kind and unclear is unkind, I guess, is if we boil all that down to a simple message, it's that. So we know that moments that matter, one of those is getting feedback from a boss. If you think about your own experience, I'm sure you can remember times when you had a performance review or you had a one-on-one, and you walked out of that feeling like, I don't know why I'm even in this job anymore. You just feel disheartened because all you got was all this bad news. Or you walked out feeling like, I'm not quite sure what that conversation was about, because you got the feedback sandwich, which was, I got some good news, some bad news, and some good news. I'm not sure which one of those actually applies here. Maybe that's an approach you've heard about for feedback. It doesn't work. There's a lot of research around that tells us that the feedback sandwich doesn't work, because clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And the feedback sandwich, where we kind of, we praise somebody and then we point out something that they need to fix, and then we praise them again. They walk away going, well, what was that about? They're not going to hear everything, or they're certainly not going to get a clear message. So don't recommend the feedback sandwich if we having a one-on-one with somebody. Rather, we need to be very direct with them. And we can still let them know that we care by saying, look, I'm giving you this feedback because we have very high standards here, and I trust in your ability to reach them. I don't have to puff them up with false praise. I can say to them, you're not meeting standards and we have high standards, but the good news is I trust in your ability to reach them. That's why we're having this conversation. It's delivering a message of trust without fluffing it up with false praise. When we have those feedback conversations, it's important to think about, again, if we think about that moment for them, what are we actually giving them feedback about? Is it about a skill set? Is this a technical process? When you're helping and assisting someone into a car, this is how we do it. This is not how we do it. That's a skill set, right? When you're entering the data at the end of the day, this is how we do it. This is not how we do it. This is okay. This is not okay. That's just a skill set thing. Or is it a behavior thing? How are they speaking to people? How are they communicating? Or perhaps there's an attitude that they're bringing into the workplace. What's this feedback about? Is it task related? Is it behavior related? Because task related feedback tends to be very specific and clear and easy to deliver. Behavior conversations are a little bit more complex, a little fuzzier, and we need to perhaps travel a little more carefully. So how do we have these conversations well? Again, having a framework or having some scaffolding around that is really helpful. One of the best frameworks I've come across, it's one I've used with all the organizations I work with. Kim Scott, in her book Radical Candor, also talks about this framework. It's becoming more and more popular across the industry. CORE stands for, if we're giving someone a feedback conversation, CORE stands for context, observations, results, and expectations. It sets a framework around this conversation that makes it very clear about what's happening here. Makes it very clear about what I want them to see and hear, what I want them to think, and what I want them to be doing afterwards. So I've thought about this conversation a little before I've had it, and I've got a framework of how I want to move through this conversation. I want to set a very specific context. This is what happened, where, when, who, what, how. I want to talk about what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. This is objective observation. I'm not attacking their character or their personality or them as a person. I'm talking about the problem, not the person. This is the issue. This is what I saw occurred. Then I want to talk about, well, what's the impact of that? What's at stake here? If this behavior continues or this approach continues, what's the impact of that on them as an individual, on the clients we're serving, on the organization, on their career path? What do we gain or lose? And what are our expectations moving forward? Who's going to do what by when, and how will we know that it has been done? So, for example, I might have a team member. We've just had a team meeting that didn't go as I'd planned. I'd say, Jono, so context, Jono, could we have a quick conversation, please, about your communication style and its impact on the team? I've set the context. So Jono knows this conversation is about his communication style and its impact on the team. We've contained it. We've put a fence around what this conversation is about. And then so my observation, so Jono, in the team meeting we just had, I noticed that 3 times you spoke over the top of other people that were beginning to share ideas. What I saw was they stopped speaking, they stopped contributing to the conversation. They were sitting back with their arms folded. I haven't run down anyone's character. I'm simply saying what I see and hear. Then I'm going to talk about, well, what's the impact of that behavior? What I'm concerned about is 2 things. One, if not everyone is contributing to the conversation, we're not getting the best ideas on the table for this project. And 2, I'm really concerned about the effect that your approach is having on team dynamics and how people are going to perceive you as a team member. So I'm talking about what's at risk here, his role in the team and the quality of the outcomes for the project. Again, it's objective. It's not about him personally. It's about what are the results of his actions. Then I'm going to say, so what I'd really like to see happen in our next team meeting, I'd like you to pay more attention to other people when they're speaking and just hold back on what you want to say until they finish talking, then offer your ideas. How does that sound to you? Now, at that point, Jono might say, well, yeah, okay, fair enough, but you were chairing the meeting. How come you didn't pull me up? How come you didn't ask them more questions? So I need to be open to that feedback as well. I'm going, yeah, okay, I can see my fingerprints there. I'll acknowledge that. And you're right, I could have done a better job of chairing that meeting. So here's what we'll do. What if we do this? After our next team meeting, let's get together and have a 5-minute chat. You're going to work on not speaking over the top of other people, and I'm going to improve how I chair a meeting. How's that sound to you? We'll check in after the next meeting for 5 minutes and see how we went. So we're very clear about what this is about, what happened, what's the impact, what we want to change, and how we're going to know that it has changed. Very, very simple process, easy to follow as a structure for a conversation, and it keeps us from derailing into personalizing or punishing people for what's going on. It's all about, let's fix this together. What does fixing this look like to you? There is a short version, when you, I feel, because, in future. It's the same content, really. Context, observations, results, expectations. So, perhaps I've received some feedback. Perhaps I've received some instructions from my boss, and I'm going, excuse me, when you give me vague instructions like that, I feel really anxious because I'm not sure I'm actually going to produce the outcomes that you want. In future, could you please give me more specifics about that particular task? Thank you. Same version, same framework, slightly shorter and more direct. And I should mention too, if we want clarity from someone else that's giving us instructions or giving us feedback, we can use this same framework to ask them questions. If I am getting a feedback sandwich from someone and it feels a little bit vague, I might say, well, can you give me some more specifics? Perhaps my boss says, hey, you're not meeting your KPIs. I've noticed you haven't hit your KPIs 3 months in a row. I really need you to lift your game. Bit vague. I might not say that to them, but I feel like, oh, that's a bit vague. Could I ask you, please, give me a little bit more specifics around the context of which KPIs you're most concerned about? What is it you're seeing that we're not doing or that we're doing too much of? How are you seeing that that's impacting the work that we need to achieve? What are your expectations? Which one of these key KPIs do you want us to focus on for this month? What will it look like if we hit that? How will we know we've achieved it? You can use the same framework to ask people questions to get clarity around what they expect of you. because until we know what we're dealing with, we don't know what we're dealing with. One of the things about those moments of feedback that we have with people and the impact that it's having on them and the impact that it's having on their workplace experience is that often those feedback conversations open up a deeper conversation. And this is where we move into coaching mode, where we need to stay curious. So, going back to Jono and the team meeting, he might be saying, look, I just feel really excited about this project. I just can't help myself. I've got to, I just got to get my ideas on the table. We now need to move into a coaching conversation and drill down a little bit deeper into that. Or perhaps there's someone else that's having another issue. One of the things that's important to ask people when they start talking about, I've got this challenge or I've got this problem or this is an issue for me, is simply to be curious and ask, rather than move in straight into giving people advice, is to stay curious and get them to name what's going on for them. So just ask them what's on your mind and what else, because often people will come to you with an issue. And those are perfect moments to create a moment of elevation or pride or insight or connection. When someone comes to us with a problem, what's on your mind? Let them tell you. And when they tell you, then say, well, what else? Because I'll guarantee there's something else beneath the surface that's really the issue for them. And what's the real challenge here for you? We might assume we know what that is, but we need to tame our advice monster. Because if people come to us with a problem and we give them advice, what do they learn from that? They learn that I'm the problem solver, and anytime I've got a problem, I go, they'll come to me and I'll give them an answer. They don't have to think, they don't have to develop, because I've got all the solutions. That's a fantasy too. So let's help grow our people. What's the challenge here for you? What is it that you actually want? I might assume that they want training. They may want coaching. Maybe they want a different role. Maybe they want to a different position within the team. What is it that you actually want here? If people can't articulate that, we need to help them drill down and find out what that is. What does fixing this look like to you? I might have an idea about how we could fix it, but I want to know what they think. And then I'm going to ask them, well, how can I help? Rather than jump in at the start with the help, let's drill down first and find out what's actually going on for them. What's the challenge they're facing? What do they think they need? And what do they think fixing it looks like? And when people say, I don't know, my favorite answer to that is, what would it be if you did know? You'd be surprised at what people will tell you. Why do we say, I don't know? I feel anxious that you might think I'm silly if I say what I'm thinking. Give me permission to say it. And then, well, what would it be if you didn't know? Just staying curious. So those are two really important moments, that first day experience, the feedback experience. We know that those are two critical elements that have the potential to create a positive workplace experience. And going a step beyond feedback, validation and appreciation, moments of validation and appreciation are another powerful way to create a positive workplace culture, one that people want to be a part of. Indra Nooyi, who the former CEO and chairperson of PepsiCo, she understood this really well. One of the things that she did wasn't just to thank people and validate them and share her appreciation with them personally. One of the things that she did, which was pure genius, really, she thought about her time in high school, or in school, and particularly in high school. Whenever she got a good report card and she would take it home to her parents, the message from the teacher to her parents of validation and appreciation for the work that she'd done as a student created something for her parents that was special. And because it was special for her parents, it was more special for her. And she thought, well, as adults, we don't get those kind of opportunities. We don't get a report card from the teacher once we're in the workplace. But what if we did? So she started writing letters of appreciation and thanks for her key executives and some of her key leaders. She would write letters of appreciation to their spouse or to their parents. She would, if you have the opportunity to read her biography, she goes into this in a little bit more detail. But she said it was such a powerful thing to write to someone else that loved that person and tell them how much she appreciated that person. The message came to them secondhand, but it came to them amplified. She elevated that moment of praise by sending it through another person. Now we can do that with our staff by contacting family members, etc., or other people that know them. But you can also do that by sending a message of thanks to someone else's manager. And when that manager comes to you and says, hey, you know what? The CEO sent me a message saying they really appreciate XYZ about you. How powerful is that message? It's been amplified. It's been elevated. And we know that one of the really powerful ways to help people feel valued and appreciated is to just tell them they're valued and appreciated. So a way to create a moment of impact is to catch people doing things right, is to just let them know, hey, just notice things. If you see something, say something. Hey, you're fantastic at dealing with those really difficult clients. I love how you manage to calm them down. I appreciate how much effort you put into your work today. Thank you. You've got a real gift for data entry. I don't know how you do that with so quickly with so few errors. It really impresses me. Thank you. Right, you really went above and beyond when we were under pressure and short-staffed the other day. I want to acknowledge that and let you know that was really important. Thank you. Right, your suggestion was really valuable. We hadn't thought about redoing this process that way before. The fact that it's now been streamlined saves us so much time and effort. Thank you. That was really valuable. It takes a few seconds, right? It takes a few seconds, but think about your own journey. Think about the one-on-ones you've had or the feedback conversations you had. Which ones stand out for you more? The ones where you got corrected and perhaps you had to acknowledge something and then go back and fix it and improve, or the ones where somebody pulled you out, kind of identified you in the crowd and say, hey, you know what you did there was special. Thank you. For most of us, it's that thanks and praise and appreciation and being valued, particularly in public, or just being acknowledged has a powerful impact. We know that. Releases dopamine, gives us oxytocin, all these wonderful kind of biochemistry going on in the body, emotional states that are really positive, that create those moments of elevation, that create those moments of meaning and purpose and connection. Now, we may not be thanking people specifically for something they've done. Perhaps it's a quality that they bring to the workplace, their generosity, their kindness, their resilience, just the fact they're showing up and not being daunted by the challenges ahead of them when it's really tough. But letting people know that we appreciate that has an incredible impact on them. We can also let them know how we feel. Right, this is part of that vulnerability. Sometimes we feel like we need to be really objective as leaders and be one step back. But people appreciate connection. People appreciate us bringing our humanity into the workplace as well. I feel proud to be part of this team when I see how you guys handle the workload that you do. I feel really excited for the future. I feel encouraged that we're finally on track and this project is going so well. I really value the support that you all bring to each other, and I feel supported as a leader seeing how you operate as a team. Letting people know that I feel valued because of the work that they're doing. So I've mentioned a couple of things, but particularly the power of saying thank you. And while I've been talking about that, perhaps someone's come to mind for you that you're thinking, oh, there's someone that's been doing a great job that I want to acknowledge that. Just write their name down now. And after we finish today, do it today. If not straight after the webinar, at least before you go home tonight, write that person a note, send them a message, send them an email, make the phone call and just say, hey, I was thinking about what you did the other day with XYZ. That was special. Thank you. Write their name down, send someone a thank you note. You're going to make their day and you'll feel great as well, right? When we're giving thanks and appreciation, we feel good as well. They feel good. It's a moment that matters. It's a moment that has impact. So our time is just about done. We've covered a lot of territory, as I said. To create a workplace that people want to be a part of, it's about creating moments that we can elevate us, moments of pride, moments of insight, moments of connection. It's understanding that we're using the business to grow people, to create a space where they feel safe, where they feel loved, where they can develop relationships. We know that people don't leave organizations, they leave managers because they feel like, there's something going on here. What we often don't hear in that story is that people stay because they have friends. They stay in an organization because they have friends. So relationship, belonging, contribution, learning and mastery, meaning and purpose. These things are critical, simple elements, but deeply powerful on a human level to help us create a workplace that people want to be a part of. So what was most useful for you today? I'd like you to just take a moment to think, looking back over your notes, what stood out for you today? Was it, understanding the experience economy? Was it something about the feedback process, the growth mindset, psychological safety? Whatever that was, I'd encourage you to kind of focus in on that. If you had an aha moment today, if you had some moment of insight, what does that insight ask of you? What will you put into practice? What could you do in the next 24 hours to begin to create a habit that will grow over time? What could you do over the next week? What will you practice over the next month? How will you begin to turn this around and begin to create a workplace experience that people want to be a part of? So that's it for me. I'm going to hand back now to Vicky. We do have a couple of minutes if you have questions, but I'm sure Vicky can pass on my contact details. If you do have other questions or other information you'd like to know, feel free to contact me via Vicky. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So back to you, Vicky. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Bruce. That was very, very insightful. Changes the way you think about a few things there, doesn't it?
Yeah, hopefully.
So if there's no other questions coming from our crowd today, I believe that's probably about it. All of this information, the recording of the webinar today, the presentation slides, and all of that resources that Bruce was referring to will be made available to those people that registered to attend today, whether they made it or not. And we'll put a little update into the member update this week as well with Bruce's contact details if anybody would like to reach out and contact him a bit further for some more information. So thank you very much, Bruce. Really appreciate your time today to deliver this for us. It was very, very good. Like I said, very insightful, good food to take away and munch on and learn from.
Thanks, Vicky.
No worries. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you at the next CTO webinar. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.